First, we want to give you some overview about the situation in Sweden, because that is an important background on what is happening, and something about the business model. Then we come into the method that we started to do for the Swedish Broadband Commission. And then we end up with an example, a study that we have made for the city of Stockholm. We are not going through the whole study, we're taking a few examples. We also have a summary here if some of you wants to read this. If there happens to be one or another that wants the full story, we can deliver it to you. But there's a lot of pages with calculation and so on. So this is more the findings. First of all, I want to say something about the digital agenda. It's really nice to have these expressions, and I think that everyone in this room can agree upon this. It would be really wonderful if we can achieve this. If you look on the Commission, excuse me, Guido, if you look on the Commission's website, you can see there is just a few countries that has achieved this goal or are close to doing it. Most of them are far away. And the problems that are identified is that we have trusted too much on the market or the incumbents. They are not doing the necessary investments for many different reasons. Those countries, those places, those regions that makes a difference are those that you can see the public sector are involved. And this is something that we have seen in our studies, that the public sector has a really crucial role in the development of broadband. First of all, there is many things that is depending on the broadband rollout. And one thing is to see how many jobs will it create just by rolling out these networks. I stole these figures from the European Commission. But it's important to say that it's not just a cost. The money we spend are used on the industry. People get job, we buy equipment, and the people that get paid, they pay taxes and they buy services and so on. So most of the money goes back to the society. It's not actually spending money, it's used money. So if you are a municipality, you are part of the society, and you need to have a local digital agenda. Don't even trust on the European or the national digital agenda. Do your own digital agenda. Build upon your circumstances, your region, your municipality, and you also need a local digital champion that should lead this work. When we have looked into the municipality that has success, we could see two things that are important for the development. First of all, that you have a digital champion. That is really important. The impact of written word are not so strong as someone that goes out and talk to people. We have seen many good examples of that. And the other is to involve the housing associations. Municipalities without strong housing associations has not too much broadband, unfortunately. And in Sweden we can see those municipalities that has more than 80% fiber to the home is mostly driven by the housing associations. So I think that is really important. And the city office are responsible for the city planning. And they're always very important for them to see that we have roads, we have water and sewers and what, but most of them forget about the broadband. And I would say, don't accept any city plans without broadband. You need to consider that. People can't live without broadband anymore. And first, connect all the public buildings, like they did here. Because people that are used to have the broadband in school, they will have a demand for it even in their home. But municipalities are also very important as owner of infrastructure. I would say that if we should trust on just the market, just on the incumbents, there will be no broadband development at all. It's necessary that the public sector take part of this, but to accept not to compete with the market, just as a complement to the market. And we could see that in most of these Swedish municipalities, that the start from this was that the market hesitated. And we can actually see people move from different municipalities because of the lack of broadband, and they moved to other places. So the municipality was forced to do something. But if the municipality build a network, you must treat everyone on equal terms. I mean, some of these local networks, they also deliver services or communication, and they have, of course, have to give everyone equal terms or equal conditions. And second, believe that when the public sector do something, it is to secure the freedom of choice, not to set up a new monopoly. That's really not a good idea. So the situation where we have identified is, in many places we spend a lot of money on building parallel infrastructure, which is no use at all. We just need one infrastructure. You can have hundreds of operators, hundreds of actors in the same fiber, and since at least 80% of the cost is the deployment of the infrastructure, I would say that is really important, and that is a part of the city planning. Don't give anyone a permit to open the ground before they can show you that they have negotiated with the others, with the water companies, with the power companies, with other operators and so on. And I would say something about this, that services over the top. Of course, there will be a lot of over-the-top services, but this internet neutrality does not work too good. Many of the incumbents, they're doing everything they can to block their competitors. So if you want to buy service from someone else, then the network, it's very complicated when we talk about operators. This is the situation we want. We want all the service provider connected to a cloud, and all the users can choose any operator, any providers they want. But that is not so easy to do. We have to separate the layers in the value chain. So infrastructure is for all, and communication operator, those that put light in this, offer any provider to use this communication. We mentioned something about this in our report, but yeah, let's skip this. So I had a problem with this picture yesterday. Anyway, what do competition means for users? It's supposed to be a picture there. We have looked into all the networks in Sweden to see if the price differs if you have competition or not. So we looked on exactly the same service, a 10 megabit symmetric service, to see, is there a difference if you have one service provider or if you have more than 10? And the difference is nearly 200 euros per year for exactly the same service, just because you have competition or not. So I would say this is important. So just a short picture on our poor country. We have 290 municipalities, and in 180 of them we have urban or city networks. And we also have a lot of cooperative village projects. Fiber to the farm, which is built by cooperative models. I mean, in every village someone has a digging machine, so they can just do it by themselves. 87% of all these networks are owned by the public sector. It's not private owned. There is a few private owned, but it's also important to say, but most of them are profitable, because this is something that we hear from many parts of Europe. There is no profit. You can never make money of building city networks. Yes, we can. We know. We have the figures. We have the result. And 90% of all these networks offers dark fiber, which means in reality that any operator in the European single market can go into any of these networks and lease infrastructure to offer their services. They can even go into one of them because they have crossover operations, so you can connect to all these municipalities. So that is a new ecosystem, I would say. Yeah, let's go to face the problem. The problem is that when we discuss broadband rollout, we always start with a traditional telco model. that we have used for 100 years, when we have one actor that builds one infrastructure for his services to his customer. And we still use the same business model. How smart is that? It's very easy to calculate the rollout cost, and then when it comes to calculate the revenue, we look on the traditional telco service, internet, telephony, and TV, and maybe some other telco services. So what we try to do is to see, can we identify things that are happening in society after you have rolled out this? Because if it looks like this, that the return is lower than investment cost, most of the networks, they will hesitate to roll out and say, we can't do it. So we found out that there is something we call the uncaptured values that has to be included in the calculation. Impact on society, impact on other parts than those that is controlled by the net owners. So we had a good couple of days trying to draw a map to see could we find what this uncaptured values is. Could we make an analysis of them? So this is what we found. And I guess this is just a few examples, but the most important thing is you have the direct economic activity, like we discussed before. Most of the money you spend is going direct into the economy, direct to the industry, which gives people work. You have a new infrastructure that you didn't have before. And that creates a lot of things that was not possible before. And you have high speed. And I was also very often, too often, hear that there's no demand for high speed. How do you know that if you don't have it? Was there a demand for Forzati before we had high roads? You must build the roads first. And what we can see from our studies is that when you build a high-speed network, someone will invent services that will be supported by this high speed. And you will see new entrepreneurs starting businesses in these remote and rural places. So I would say that the digital natives, the people that are growing up today, they are very important. They are not only the users, they are the new entrepreneurs. They will start business that we can't imagine what it is, and all of them will demand bandwidth. It's not enough with 10 megabits or 100 megabits. We must look much more longer away than that. That is, everything is connected. I mean, we are talking about billions of connected devices, and every one of them will need bandwidth. Something that I think is very important to say is that people are actually happier if they have fiber than those that do not have fiber. The definition of happy is that you don't have so much trouble as you have with other technology. I mean, I heard today somebody talking about we have to be technology neutral. And I said not, because we need fiber. Other technologies like wireless and whatever, LTE, 4G, need fiber. I mean, how could you roll out a 4G network if you don't have a fiber backbone? It's impossible. So fiber is the backbone, not only for the broadband, but for the society. Yeah. So I'll give the word to my colleague Marco that has made most of this calculation, so he can explain something how we did about this.
Yeah, so you saw the picture before. It's very complex. The number of factors that are affected by broadband are very many and connected in a complex way. So we started to have a look at a few of them, the ones that are, let's say, most obvious. So the fact that you have a new infrastructure will, in general, increase the value of your property value. This is true if you install an elevator or if you renew the facade of the building, and pretty much in the same way if you install a new infrastructure like broadband, it increases the market value. The other thing is that when you have a new infrastructure, you can go away from the traditional business model, the vertically integrated telco model, And if you build a new business model in a proper way, you can increase competition between service providers. This is basically what Crister was mentioning before, having one infrastructure open to competition on the market. And this, of course, leads to lower prices and better services. So we try to put some numbers on these factors. And for the increased market value, we could see that there is an agreement in Sweden that states that an apartment that is fiber connected has a higher value, and then the tenant association agrees to pay a €5 higher rent to the property owners. And actually, we will see some more numbers on these. The value of the property is affected as well. For prices, we could see that, for example, the city of Stockholm and other municipalities and regions across Sweden were able to save between 15 and 50% in their data and communication costs. And actually, we started to look at some examples also across Europe. And there was something similar we were observing in Piemonte in northwestern Italy. It's a common phenomenon when you are able to go to the market with your own infrastructure. Then you're able to get a lot better prices. And this is without counting the actual better speeds that you get on the new infrastructure. And if you look at the retail market, we can look at prices in the Swedish fiber networks. Oops, I don't have any numbers here, but you can get 100 megabit symmetrical for around as low as €8 per month, and this is thanks to the hundreds of operators present on the fiber networks. We also did a study across the whole country to see. So the picture that Crister showed before showed a lot of very complex interactions, and in the end, a lot of them end up on higher employment. So instead of trying to model each of these steps and try to put numbers on each of these steps, we have taken the whole country and tried to see what has happened after the fiber was deployed. And the good thing with Sweden is that fiber has started being deployed for some time now, and also that it's mainly driven at municipal level. This means that some municipalities have invested in a lot of fiber, some of them in nothing, and some of them in between. And this gives us the data differentiation that you need to run a statistical study. So we ran regression analysis on Sweden's 290 municipalities and tried to correlate the fiber penetration in the year 2007 with the change in employment between the year 2007 and 2010. And this gives us the opportunity to remove backward causality, and of course we controlled for a number of factors that also impact employment. And when we do that, we found weak but significant correlation. And if you put numbers on it, you find that statistically a 10% higher fiber penetration leads to an improvement in the employment situation of 0.1% 3 years down the line. Now, that may not sound a lot, but if you translate this into numbers, you find that 10% higher broadband fiber penetration for the whole country of Sweden would cost around 5.5 billion crowns. This is about 600 million euros. Yeah. And but on the other hand, 0.1% higher employment corresponds to around 120 million euros. And this is something that is per year, as opposed to the 5.5 billion Swedish crowns that are a 20 or 30-year investment. So already this is quite significant numbers.
Yeah. A very good example is the open ICT infrastructure in Stockholm. The blue dots represent neutral connection point, which means that every enterprise or households can connect to one of these, and they can reach those close to 100 operators that are in the system. So it's really an open network. And besides that, there is also 500, or more than 500 organizations that lease fiber from this network. So it is an open infrastructure for all. And it would never be possible to have it if the city was not treated the fiber as an infrastructure for society. They didn't consider this as a telco service. It was just to avoid that these 100 operators would open the streets. Just imagine what congestion we will have if they would come to open the streets all the time. So let's look into Stockholm. We made a study first for the Swedish Broadband Commission to see if we could create a model to evaluate the benefit of broadband investment. And after we did that, we were asked by the City of Stockholm to see if those 20 years of fiber deployment in Stockholm had any socio-economic benefit. So we tried to look on a lot of different things, but what we have in this report is the profit of Stockholm itself, the economic impact of the industry, I mean the turnover of all the investments, the results of higher employment, and the lower cost for 100 megabits user in enterprises. And we compared to another similar city the use of 100 megabits and the price for 100 megabits. So we estimated how many of the enterprises use 100 megabits. So we took an average figure of that and said, well, so much money has the enterprises saved. And we look on the savings in communication costs for public sector and the higher value of properties and user value. So we did not took all of these 40 different things that are changed because of fiber. Of course, we could include, not easily, but we could include a lot of more factors, probably with hundreds of factors. But it's a lot of work to do a scientific, reliable calculation of it. So this is what is in this examples. Yeah.
Well, the first, of course, the first impact that you look at is on the city of Stockholm themselves. Stockholm is the company that did the fiber deployment, and it's interesting to show this figure because, as Crister said before, the common opinion is that if a municipality or a region gets involved and does a deployment, then it's a lot of taxpayers' money. In fact, this figure shows Stockholm's profit accumulated over the years, and you can see that they have had about 6-7 years to reach break-even, and nowadays they are actually running quite a nice profit that is reinvested constantly in new infrastructure. So it's not such a bloody business to get yourself in. But of course, once you start deploying the infrastructure, the first thing that happens is that you will start stimulating the market, just because you have to dig up the streets and put down the equipment, and that creates economic activity short term in the city, in the region. And you can see here, this is the accumulated economic activity in the city of Stockholm due to the fiber deployment. You can see that it's several times the profit of Stockholm. And this is expressed in billion crowns. So basically you remove 1 zero and you get euros, more or less. This is, yes, so the savings that we were mentioning before have been about 100 million Swedish crowns, so 10 million euros per year. And this is something that has started to accumulate very early on, because the city has connected all their centers or their activities in the city. So they were able to negotiate data and communication services at cheaper prices very early on. So this has accumulated over 20 years to quite significant numbers already, 2 billion Swedish crowns. And if you want to take this one. When users start to get fiber to the home also, the numbers that I mentioned before, this is the accumulated use value. And this benefit has started to accumulate a bit later, around 2008, when most people got fiber connections to their own apartments. But nonetheless, it's starting to grow very quickly. It's around 160 million crowns at the moment.
Something that was not realized from start was that the value of property was growing so fast. I mean, if you get higher rent, higher income on your property, on your multi-dwelling units, the value is also growing. So today you could say that the situation is that the investment and the profit is quite equal. But even now, that when they're stopping investment, the value is growing all the time. So even on the access side, it is a good business for a house owner to roll out fiber in their building. And this is not fiber to the building. This is fiber to the apartments with outlets in every room. And in the Stockholm case, they have 2 outlets in every room, except in the kitchen where they just have 1. So they're building also an internal network in the apartment. And the reason from the beginning to do that is that it was so much trouble. From start they had 1 outlet inside the entrance door. And people set up wireless solutions and so on. And they had a lot of trouble, and they called the landlord. And they had close to 50,000 tenants at that moment. You can imagine what happened when 50,000 people is calling your switchboard at the same time. That is not a good idea. It's much cheaper to roll out an internal network. So that was really a good idea. And I would say that they have been paid by this several times back.
Yeah, then when we tried to estimate the total socio-economic benefit for the city of Stockholm, we took the results of the study on employment that I mentioned before, and we plugged in those figures into the Stockholm economical picture. And the numbers that we obtained are shown in this figure. You can see these error bars. These are representing the 95% confidence interval for the regression analysis. So there is quite some uncertainty on how big this effect is. So it could be, in the worst case, relatively small, so below 1 billion, but it could also be close to 15 billion. So to put a number, a final number on the socio-economic calculation, we took the average value, which is nearly 8 billion crowns. So we put together all the numbers. This is of course quite indicative. You should not take this as absolute numbers, but they give a very good idea of the order of magnitude of the benefits that we are talking about. So the total investment over the years has been about 5.4 billion crowns, so about 600 million euros. But the total socio-economic return is over 16 billion, so about 3 times the investment. And we have only looked at a number of factors that were quantifiable. There are other facts that we are that we know. For example, savings in terms of energy consumption in the housing sector. But it was a bit difficult to identify how much of that was due to fiber and how much of that was due to other ICT solutions that could be deployed also on legacy infrastructure. So a lot of things are a bit more difficult to quantify. We left them out. So we believe that this is already, it's big numbers, but it's quite a conservative evaluation of the socio-economic benefit. yeah, this shows the evolution of the investment in red and the return in green. You can see that the socio-economic break-even, let's say, is reached about 3-4 years after the investment has started, and now the investment is starting to peter out. So we are almost completed. We have almost completed the network, but the socio-economic benefit is still growing strong.
So what we now try to do is to include more factors into this. So we are at the moment starting to look on healthcare, elderly care, home care, to see the value of that. We try to see about new companies, new entrepreneurs, and the impact of that. So we will expand this study. But what we could do at this moment is to take this result and transfer it to any region or city. So we can go into which city you want in Finland or other regions to say, hey, let's take this result and translate it to your place, and to see what would the socio-economic result be on these few factors if you roll out fiber. So we have a few of this summary here if you want to read more of it. If you want to go even deeper and look into Marcus regression analysis, we can provide you with all the calculations. So I guess this is it. Thank you.